Hey everybody, what's up? Review Man here, and today I am reviewing Hush. Not the Batman villain that goes around killing people and takes off their faces and pieces them together so he can be other people. No, I'm talking about the 2016 movie Hush. And now this movie is about a young girl named, no, not a young girl, a young lady named Maddie, who was deaf and because she lost a case she was battling a case against meningitis. She's a writer, and she's living by herself in isolation with her cat, and she can only communicate with sign language. And Maddie's friend is Sarah. Sarah came over and she was reading Maddie's book. She said it was a good book and all this other stuff. And while her friend's over, Sarah tells Maddie that the kitchen is smoking, and so she's cleaning up the kitchen and all this other stuff, and Maddie's like, hey, kitchen's on fire, and then Maddie's like, goes in and turns off the smoke alarm. It's a loud smoke alarm. I had to turn down the volume when I was watching this movie to get the smoke alarm. So yeah, it was a loud smoke alarm. And so Maddie said, yeah, my boyfriend John is going to, Sarah said, my boyfriend John is going to be home soon. And so I got to go. But nice talking to you. Text me or do whatever if you want to talk. And so Maddie goes back in the house, cleans up the kitchen, and she's just cleaning up. And she goes to work on her book. But before that, she FaceTimes her, go back. Sarah Maddie's friend comes up and she's like, come on, open the door. She gets killed right in front of her, and then the killer just stabs her, and the killer's looking in the door. We have no idea where this killer came from or anything whenever he first makes his appearance. And the killer comes in the door, he just starts stabbing. And she's like, and he knocks on the window, figuring out that she's deaf. And Maddie, she opens the door after all this other stuff is going on to let her cat in, and the cat's name's Beach. So yeah, she lets the cat in, and the cat is nowhere to be found. So she just lets him in. Maddie's phone is sitting on the counter, and Maddie decides to call her sister Max, and has a little do a little sign language. Do a little sign language because that's the only way Maddie can communicate. And so Max is saying, we see the killer walk in the house and pick up the phone, and Max is like, Maddie, who's that? Someone in your house? Maddie's like, she hangs up with her sister and goes to investigate. And cause Maddie thinks it's the cat walking around in the house. And so she's just like, yeah, do, shaking the cat food. And so Maddie goes back after the cat's nowhere to be found. Maddie, she says, she's just going back to her work. She sees this email pop up, and the email is a bunch of different pictures that the killer took with Maddie's phone. And so she's looking all over the house, looking all over, and then she sees the killer like right there in the door. She closes the door, and the killer, she gets some lipstick and writes some stuff. And the killer is like trying to find all these ways that try to get in the house. But Maddie's locked all the doors and windows, locked everything in the house. And so she wrote this letter on the door that said, didn't see face, and boyfriend's coming home. And so the killer looks at the door, looks at the note, takes off the mask, which I think is the most dumbest thing that you could ever do if you're a killer, take off your mask. And so yeah, he takes off the mask, and he's just like, you can read my lips, can't you? It didn't have to be this way, Maddie. And goes on his whole spiel. And Maddie is not buying a bit of it. And so he's trying to go he's going through all out of the house, downstairs, upstairs. And Maddie gets this idea to call the cops. And the killer goes over to the fuse box, which is located outside the house. Turns off the fuse box. And Maddie has no communication because the only way that she can call the cops is through Wi-Fi, through FaceTime. Because she can signal out stuff with FaceTime and all this other stuff. Oh yeah, there's also one character in this movie that has absolutely no relevance to the whole movie. This guy that Maddie's talking to, his name is Greg. They only make very brief mention about him. And so yeah, anyway, back to the story. And so the killer, he's going all throughout the house with he's got a crossbow, like Daryl Dixon in Walking Dead. He's got a crossbow, and he's trying to like find all these ways in and all this other stuff. They do like these cat and mouse games. He tries to get, and Maddie, she's hiding in her room, and the killer comes up with Sarah's dead body, tapping on the window. Sarah's like breaking down in tears because she sees her friend dead. And so what she does is she's like sends out like all these distractions, like she turns the alarm on in her car. She tries to get Sarah's phone. The killer comes back. She hits him in the hand with a hammer, like the back end of a hammer, and she goes up on the roof, throws this light out, and the killer, she's trying to climb down. The killer shoots her in the leg with a crossbow. That's the guy's name in the movie, the killer, because we have no idea what his actual name is. Never gives it. And so, yeah, the movie goes on, and they're doing all this other stuff. And, yeah, she's just trying to figure out how to get out of the house. And she's hiding up underneath porches, hiding all throughout the house, and the killer's just trying to find a way in to get her. And so John is Sarah's boyfriend. John comes up, looks to investigate. He's knocking on the door. He's like, and the killer overhears him. The killer comes off as this cop, and he's like, hold your hands up, hold your hands up. Police, please. And the killer's like saying to John, we heard this, he said, who are you? He's like, I'm John. I'm looking this over here looking for my boyfriend. The police like, the killer says, can I have your ID? And he's like, okay, here. Gives it to him. And then they start going back and forth asking questions and all this other stuff. And so while all this is going on, Maddie's in the house trying to get the killer's crossbow to work because she jumps outside, got the killer's crossbow, and she's trying to figure out how to put the bolt on the thing, on the gun. And so, yeah. The killer, he said, he's trying to act as this cop. And then John is getting suspicious, starts asking questions. And he says, okay, you're asking questions. And he's like, you got a call from this house? From Maddie? And the killer says, yeah. Well, that's weird because Maddie's a mute and a deaf. And the killer just basically gave himself away at that moment. And John, he says, there's a spare key right up underneath that planter. And then the killer and John get into a fight. The killer ends up killing John, stabs him in the neck and stabs him in the leg. And then he's in the bleeding now trying to fight the dude. John dies. John's out of the picture. Like 3 or 4 people die. And Maddie's just knocking on the door. And the killer's like, I'm coming in. And so Maddie's like trying to figure out how, because at this moment, Maddie is shot in the leg. She's bleeding, and some other thing. And Maddie's just trying to figure out how, and the killer's like, I'm coming in the house. And then Maddie's just like bleeding there. And so what Maddie does is she gets a knife from the kit. She gets a knife. And a knife and a gun, and she hides in the bathroom. And the killer somehow he gets in the bathroom through a window, I think, and he says, I'm going to figure out how to make you scream. And Maddie feels the knife on the back of her head, turns around, stabs the killer, and they're running back to the house, and the killer's is like saying some very unsettling things to Maddie. Like calls her the C word, stupid B, and all that other stuff. I don't like to say those kind of words, but yeah. She ends up killing the killer by trying to choke him. And she grabs this corkscrew from a wine bottle, stabs him in the jugular, and he's like bleeding out. He's bleeding out. And yeah, she calls the cops, and she just leaves the phone there. And then the last thing we see in this movie is the cops arriving, and Maggie's just sitting there with her eyes closed, just trying to think that the killer's dead, her book's finished, and all this other stuff. And so yeah, that was Hush. I thought it was a pretty good movie myself. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And go check it out. So I will see you guys in the next video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. Peace out.